Ashes to ashes, dust to fangs. Oh look, you came back, I'll admit it. I'm surprised. Most people don't come back after meeting me once. They get one whiff of my winning personality and decide they'd rather take their chances with a pissed-off werewolf in heat. But here you are. Guess that means you either like me or you've got a thing for bad decisions. Either way, welcome back, for the newbies. You should have done your homework, but fine, I'll make this quick. Name's Joe. Joe Ballore. I run Night Fangs Detective Agency. Slogan? Taking a bite out of crime one neck at a time. Yeah, it's clever. I'm a clever guy. And if the name didn't clue you in, let me spell it out. I'm a vampire. Here's your crash course in Vampire 101 Ballore Edition. No, the sun won't turn me into a pile of ash. But it makes me feel like I drank a gallon of cheap vodka and forgot to die. Garlic? Just a seasoning. But if you eat too much of it and breathe in my direction, I might kill you anyway. Holy water? Mostly just bad plumbing and wishful thinking. Sparkling? If I ever do, drive a stake through my heart immediately. Got all that? Good. Because I'm not repeating myself. Now let's get to the real reason you're here. The case that's got the whole damn Vampire Council shaking in there. Overpriced leather boots, a vampire elder, dead. Turned to nothing but ash in a locked penthouse, no fire, no silver. No wooden stake. Something worse. Something that scared a guy who was supposed to be untouchable. And now? I've got a bad feeling I'm about to find out why. A Night Fangs Detective Agency case, number 1101I. The case begins. It started the way these things always do. With someone I'd rather not see standing in my office, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else too. The guy was tall, built like an unpaid debt, and dressed in the kind of suit that said, "I kill people for a living." But I still appreciate fine tailoring. His name didn't matter, his job did. Vampire Council Enforcer. That meant bad news. He didn't sit, didn't take off his gloves, just stood there, eyes like polished stone, and said, "Lucien Moreau is dead." I let the name settle in the room like a bad smell. Lucien Moreau. One of the oldest vampires in the city. Old enough that even other vamps got nervous around him. Rich, powerful, dangerous. The kind of guy who didn't just die. Accident? I asked. The enforcer's jaw twitched. That's the official story, which meant it wasn't the real one. And the unofficial? We need this handled. Quietly. I leaned back in my chair, laced my fingers together, and smirked. You guys must be real desperate if you're coming to me. The enforcer didn't rise to the bait, just reached into his coat, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across my desk. Half now, half when it's done. I thumbed through the bills. Enough to make a dent in my bar tab, not enough to make me feel good about whatever was waiting for me at Moreau's penthouse. Fine, I said. But if I find out this job is more than just a cleanup, I'm charging extra. The enforcer nodded. Do whatever you need to, just get it done. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the scent of expensive cologne and quiet menace in his wake. I sighed, pocketed the cash, and grabbed my coat. A vampire elder had gone up in smoke in a locked penthouse. That meant one of two things. He either did it to himself or something got in and made damn sure he didn't get out. Neither option sounded good. The crime scene. You ever walk into a place so quiet, so still that it makes your instincts scream? Like the air itself is holding its breath? That was Lucien Moreau's penthouse. I'd slipped past security with my usual blend of bullshit and overconfidence, flashing a fake badge that read Sovereign Mutual Insurance and mumbling about payout assessments. The doorman barely looked at me. Nobody questions a guy in a cheap suit with a clipboard. Inside it was everything you'd expect from an elder's crib. Marble floors, imported leather furniture, art that belonged in a museum. And yet for all that wealth and power, Moreau had ended up like every other vampire who stuck around too long. Dust. The pile was small, just a few fine gray mounds settled into the fibers of a costly Persian rug. Moreau himself? I took my time, scanning the room. No forced entry, no shattered windows, no busted locks, no signs of struggle. That meant whatever did this either walked right in or was already inside. I crouched near the pile of ash. Then I saw it. A mark in the dust, just faint enough that it was almost gone. Someone had dragged their finger through Moreau's remains, leaving behind a single word. Acheron. The name itched at the back of my mind. Familiar. Dangerous. But before I could put the pieces together, I felt it. Something was watching me. I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch the reflection in the glass of the penthouse window. Shadow. Tall. Stretched too thin. Moreau didn't just get killed. He was running. And whatever. Part 2. The suspects in secret. Paranoia is a hell of a drug. And Lucien Moreau? He'd been overdosing for years. Publicly, the guy was vampire royalty, an elder with enough pull to make lesser bloodsuckers bow and scrape. Rich, connected, the whole undead dream. But dig a little deeper and you'd find the cracks. He was careful. Too careful. Didn't host parties. Didn't take unnecessary meetings. And if he left his penthouse at all, it was in short, controlled bursts. Like a man constantly checking over his shoulder, waiting for something to catch up to him. And then it did. Now he was a pile of ash on an overpriced rug, and I was stuck figuring out which of his enemies had finally pulled the trigger, if it had even been an enemy at all. The suspects. A rival vampire. Moreau had power. Power always comes with enemies. Some old-school undead might have wanted him gone, maybe to take his seat on the council. But a clean kill like this? Not a vamp style. Too quiet. Too final. A rogue hunter. The kind that doesn't play by the usual rules. There were rumors of humans getting their hands on new weapons, things that didn't just kill vampires but erased them. If Moreau had been on their hit list, maybe this was their way of sending a message. Something else. Something older. The kind of thing Moreau might have been running from, because that word, Acheron, wasn't just a name. It was a whisper in the dark, something that made even the immortal nervous. If I wanted answers, I had one place to go. The Black Veil, a vampire-only speakeasy buried under the bones of an old jazz club in Hell's Kitchen. No neon signs, no bouncers at the door, just a narrow alley, a rusted metal hatch, and a password that changed every night. I knew the guy at the door, a thrall named Vince with the charm of a rattlesnake and the face to match. He barely looked up from his magazine as I approached. Not tonight, Balor. That what your boss said, or is this a personal grudge? Both. I sighed, slipped a folded bill into his jacket pocket. I just need a drink. Vince rolled his eyes, but stepped aside. You get your drink, then you get lost. I dropped down into the basement, into the thick haze of cigarette smoke and old blood. The Black Veil was filled with the usual mix. Vampires in expensive suits pretending they were still human, thralls looking for their next fix, and shadows in the corners that might have been people but probably weren't. I took a seat at the bar, flagged down the bartender. Whiskey. Neat. He poured, didn't ask questions. Smart guy. Behind me, the room hummed with quiet conversation. Names, places, secrets. But there was one word that made every undead voice drop to a whisper. Acheron. I leaned back, took a slow sip, and listened. Moreau hadn't been killed. Moreau had been hiding, and whatever he'd been hiding from, it was still out there. Encounter in the dark. Joe lit a cigarette he didn't need and leaned against the alley wall outside the Black Veil, a bar where supernatural types gathered to drown their sins in blood and bourbon. The neon sign buzzed like a dying wasp, casting a sickly red glow over the wet pavement. The night smelled like rain, cheap perfume, and regret. He'd been chasing ghosts all night, except this time, the ghosts were real, and they were going up in smoke. His lead on the elder's murder had dried up faster than a body in the sun. Someone was cleaning house, and not just any someone. The kind of someone that made even the Vampire Council sweat. Joe flicked his lighter shut and turned to leave. That's when he felt it. A slow, creeping dread, curling around his spine like cold fingers dragging up his vertebrae one by one. He wasn't alone. Across the alley, just beyond the glow of a flickering street lamp, it stood. Not a man. Not a vampire. Something else. It was tall, thin, its limbs too long, its posture too still. The darkness clung to it, swallowing its edges like the city itself was afraid to let it go. The air around it felt heavier, thicker, as if the alley had been vacuum sealed, trapping them both inside something unnatural. Joe didn't move. Neither did it. They just watched each other. Joe had seen plenty in his time. Things that made men go mad. Things that made even the undead pray. But this was different. A slow, deliberate motion. The thing tilted its head, far past what should have been possible. A grotesque, inquisitive gesture, like it was trying to understand what it was looking at. It knew him now. And Joe? He knew better than to push his luck. He took a long drag, held it for a second, then exhaled smoke into the cold night. Not tonight. A whisper of wind, a flicker of shadow. And just like that, the thing was gone. Joe let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He'd been hunting a killer. But now, something was hunting them all. Whatever was hunting vampires was still out there. And now, it knew his face. Part 3. The truth behind the ashes. Some cases start with a body. This one started with a pile of dust and a name that made people stop talking and start leaving the room. Acheron. I'd figured it was a person, a killer, a hitman, maybe some rogue, warlock making a name for himself in the supernatural underground. But I'd been wrong. Acheron wasn't a person. It was a thing, a weapon. And whatever it was, it scared the hell out of vampires. Tracking down the witch. If you need a good hex, a bad omen, or a spell that'll make your worst enemy piss blood for a month, you go to the witches. They don't advertise, but they always know when you're looking for them. I headed to Red Hook, where the air always smelled like seaweed and regret. The witch I needed was called Delphine, and she wasn't the friendly Eye of Newton tarot card type. She was the kind that cursed a guy just for knocking too loud. Her place was a crumbling brownstone with charms hanging from the doorframe, twigs wrapped in red thread, dried bones, things that made my fangs ache just looking at them. Knocked anyway. The door swung open on its own. That's not ominous, I muttered, stepping inside. Delphine was in the middle of her living room, sitting cross-legged in front of a giant bowl filled with something black and writhing. Her eyes flicked up to me, unimpressed. Joe Belore, she drawled. Still alive. Depends on how you define alive. But yeah. I leaned against the doorframe. I need information. She flicked her fingers, and the writhing black mess in the bowl stopped moving. And what's that worth to you? Not Sucking the life out of your customers? She smirked. Cute, but you're here about Acheron, aren't you? I stiffened. She chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, that thing's bad news, worse than bad. If I had any sense, I'd turn you into a toad and drop you in the river just for saying the name in my house. But you won't. She sighed. No, I won't. Then she stood, dusting off her hands. Because if you're asking, that means you've already seen what it does. What Acheron really is. Delphine walked over to a locked cabinet, muttered something in a language I didn't recognize, and pulled out an old leather-bound book. The thing reeked of age, dust, and something darker. She flipped through the pages, stopping at a hand-drawn illustration. I didn't like what I saw. Acheron wasn't just an object. It was a weapon designed to do one thing: erase vampires. Not kill, not weaken, erase. It devours the essence, Delphine said, tapping a long nail against the page. Pulls the soul, the blood, the very existence of a vampire into itself. Leaves nothing but ashes behind. I thought of Moreau, his paranoia, his refusal to leave his penthouse, the fact that there had been no signs of struggle. He used it on himself, I realized. Delphine nodded. Better to vanish than let whatever was hunting him take him. I exhaled sharply. What the hell was he running from? Delphine hesitated, and that scared me more than anything. You saw it, didn't you? She finally asked. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. The thing in the alley. Tall. Thin. Wrong. It had looked at me the way a cat looks at a mouse it's not hungry enough to eat. Yet. Ambush in the dark. I left Delphine's place with more questions than answers. And as soon as I stepped into the street, I knew I wasn't alone. Shadows moved in the alley. Fast. Too fast for humans. I didn't wait for introductions. My gun was in my hand before I even had time to think about it. The first one lunged. Fangs, claws, wild, eyes a feral, not the mindless type but the kind that had let the hunger take over. I fired. The blessed round slammed into his chest, not killing him but slowing him down long enough for me to move. The second one came from my blind spot. Clawed hands raked across my coat, slicing fabric, missing skin by a fraction of an inch. Too close. I twisted, drove my elbow into his throat, then shoved the barrel of my gun under his chin and pulled the trigger. Boom. The back of his head went missing. I turned to the first one, still staggering. Put a bullet in his kneecap. Another, in his forehead. He crumpled. And then, just like that, the alley was quiet again. I exhaled, reloaded, and leaned against the wall, wiping blood off my sleeve. This wasn't just a hit. This was a warning. Whoever, or whatever, was behind Acheron. They knew I was looking. And they weren't happy about it. The final revelation. Turns out Moreau wasn't just an elder with too much money and too many enemies. He was part of something. Bigger, something the Vampire Council didn't want me finding out about. Follow for more. Continue in part 4. Final part. Moreau's last steps. The trick to investigating the undead is that they don't leave footprints. No credit card statements, no phone bills, no bad takeout receipts. But Moreau had patterns. Paranoia makes you predictable. I followed. His last known movements. He'd been careful but not careful enough. He kept visiting the same places, the same people, and one name kept popping up. Dr. Evelyn Holloway. The woman was a historian, a scholar of the occult. Council adjacent. The kind of person vampires consulted when they wanted to know how to kill something before it killed them. I tracked her down to a small office in Soho. buried in the back of an old bookstore. The kind of place that smelled like old paper, dust, and secrets nobody should know. The door was unlocked. I should have turned around right then. Dead don't talk, but they leave messages. The second I stepped inside, I knew I was too late. Dr. Evelyn Holloway was dead, not turned. Not drained. Dead. She sat slumped over her desk, her skin pale, lips parted like she'd died mid-sentence. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no wounds, just gone. But her hand was gripping something. I pried it from her stiff fingers. A note, scrawled in frantic, desperate handwriting. We let it out, we thought we could contain it, we were wrong, Moreau knew. He chose the easy way out. If you're reading this, run. Something shifted behind me, a breath of air that wasn't mine. I turned, gun in hand. Nothing there. But the air was wrong. Thick, heavy. Like the universe had hiccuped and something had slipped through. Then I noticed the books on the shelves. They were rotting, pages curling inward, covers blackening as if time itself had sped up just for them. And then I heard it. Not a sound. Not exactly. More like a whisper at the edge of hearing. A not voice, scraping against the inside of my skull. I didn't wait around to find out what happened next. I backed out the door, note in hand, and put as much distance between me and that office as possible. Moreau's suicide wasn't suicide. Pieced it together on my way back to my office. Moreau hadn't been assassinated. He hadn't been targeted by some rival. He had chosen to die. He used Acheron on himself because it was the only way out. Not because of the council. Not because of a vendetta, but because of whatever they had let out, and now it was loose. The council's dirty secret. By the time I got back to Night Fangs, I had a visitor waiting for me. A council enforcer. Big guy. No neck. Smelled like cheap cologne and old blood. Case is closed, Balor, he said before I could even sit down. I dropped into my chair, tossed the note on the desk. Funny, didn't know murder cases closed themselves. The enforcer's jaw tightened. You're done. You get paid, you forget what you found. I leaned back, laced my fingers behind my head. And what exactly did I find? Silence. Then, nothing. That was all I needed to hear. I grinned. Yeah, that's what I thought. They weren't trying to solve the case. They were trying to bury it. And that meant whatever was out there, it wasn't done yet. Basics. Aftermath. The thing about dealing with the Vampire Council? You never really win. Best case scenario, they pay you to shut up. Worst case, they make you shut up. So I played it cool when the cleanup crew arrived at Moreau's penthouse. Men in tailored suits with dead eyes and gloved hands. Find anything useful, Balor? One of them asked, already knowing the answer he wanted. Shrugged. Rich guy burned to dust in his own penthouse. Looks like a freak accident to me. The lead enforcer, a guy named Solomon with a voice like crushed gravel, gave me a long look. He was trying to decide if I was too stupid to be a problem or just smart enough to lie convincingly. I made it easy for him. Case closed, gentlemen. I dusted my hands. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got an appointment with a bottle of whiskey and some really poor life choices. They let me go. They thought I'd learned my lesson. Acheron's secret, I hadn't. Because while they were sweeping the place, scrubbing away evidence, making sure Moreau's death would never be more than a whisper in the dark, I kept a little souvenir. Tucked in my pocket, wrapped in an old handkerchief, was a shard of Acheron. I found it in the carpet buried deep in the ashes. It was small like a sliver of obsidian, but when I held it, I felt it. A pull. A weight. Like something inside it was still alive. I didn't know what the hell Moreau had done. what kind of dark deal he'd made before he turned himself into dust. But I knew one thing. It wasn't over. Still hungry? I left. The penthouse stepping out into the cool Manhattan night. The city moved on like it always did. Taxis honked, people laughed. Neon signs buzzed overhead. Nobody had a clue what was out here. I lit a cigarette, took a drag, and exhaled slow. Then I muttered to myself, just loud enough for the night to hear. Whatever's out there, it's still hungry. And I had a feeling I'd be on the menu soon enough. The end.